Cool. Okay, that was the slang term. We talked about what it actually meant. Yes, Emily? Being different, that was the exact term. Okay, so being different and being countercultural, right? So, can someone remind me what the words countercultural mean?
What?
Countercultural. Anto. Not for society, so opposing society. Was Jesus countercultural? Yeah? He definitely was. He was what? Above? He definitely was. He was above society. So, and what we're learning these weeks and the next 2 weeks to come is that we have to be different just like how Jesus was, right? So in order to do that, we have to follow the same way. Hey guys, let go of each other. Let go. Thank you. So we have to be different just like how he was. So today's lesson is how radical people watch their words. So I think that this is a very countercultural topic because I don't think that we're very careful with our words, right? So we've all been in situations where we've exchanged insults with someone, right? I hear y'all do this all the time. I don't understand how y'all can roast each other so badly and like not cry. I don't get it because I hear y'all sometimes and I'm like, oh my goodness. No, I don't. Shh, Dalton. Shh. Okay, so we're doing this constantly, right? Whether it's with our friends for fun, y'all do this all the time, or maybe with your siblings. That's very common. I know Anto and Jimena do that to me. But sometimes we can also use those as weapons. So we use it for gossip. We use it to insult people, to criticize them. And so that doesn't always have to be like directly. I'm not gonna go up to someone and be like, hey, I don't like this about you and I have a problem with you. Most of the times, the way that we do that is indirectly, right? So we either do it through text because they can't see us, or we do it like behind their backs, which is not good, right? So I'm going to ask y'all 3 questions, and if y'all can relate to them, just raise your hand. So it's gonna be a little, yeah, okay, go ahead. So the first one is gonna be, have you gotten angry because of someone's words recently? I can raise my hand to this one too. Aw, Bailey, don't call them out. Okay, second question. Dang, that's a lot of hands. Okay, second question. Have you been hurt or embarrassed by someone's words recently? Recently. So recently, maybe like in the past month. Let's go through that, in the past month. And third question. Have you said anything to anger, hurt, or embarrass someone else? Like you did it? Dang, okay, all right. So those were a lot of hands for all 3 questions. Shh, guys, shh, shh. So those were a lot of hands up for all 3 of those questions, right? So we've all been hurt by others, and that sucks. But we've also been those people to hurt other people as well, and that's also not okay, right? So I'm gonna share a little story about a time that someone's words hurt me. And so, I mean, I've mentioned this a plethora of times, but basically, so I think that the cultural norm, and there goes like that word going back to cultural, like not being countercultural, right? And I'm sure that y'all know this, especially students, seniors, y'all are probably feeling this pressure already, and it's like, you're going to high school for 4 years. You graduate, you go to college immediately after, you finish in 4 years, and then you have a job. So that's the norm, right? But we all know that it's never really like that. Yeah, okay, thank you. And so, my plan was a lot like that. I graduated high school, and my passion at the time was psychology, and I'm still majoring in psychology, but at the time, I had this whole plan. I was gonna go to community college for 2 years, then transfer out of San Antonio and go to a school in Kerrville for their psychology program because it was really good, then go to school for another 2 years to get my master's, and then hopefully become a developmental psychologist. And that was my plan, right? And I was super pumped and everything, and when I told my parents this, they were super pumped. Everyone around me was really happy for me and were excited about the plans that I was making for my future. But 2020 comes along, and then everything kind of changes. So, for the better, right? But at the time, it didn't seem like that. So, because I started volunteering as like a youth leader at the church that I go to, I started volunteering here, and then I found like this interest. And so I started going to like these classes that were training me to be a leader. And then that's whenever like everything just changed, because I found that I had a huge love for teaching, a huge love for mentoring, and a huge love for being around youth, because I knew that whenever I was in middle school and high school, I lacked so many people like mentoring me through that, right? And because of that, it just changed what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So I couldn't imagine getting close to all of these students and finding this new passion in ministry and then just leaving San Antonio once I was done like at a community college, right? So once I went to my parents again and I told them all of these new plans, it changed, right? So if y'all don't know, I live with both of my parents right now, and I love my parents to death. They are amazing people, but they come from a different country, right? So they were born in Mexico and then they came here. And so in their mind, coming from like a not so great country with very great resources and opportunities, like they want the best for their children. And so to them, that's school. And so whenever I came to them saying like, hey, I'm still gonna be in school and I'm gonna finish my degree, but it's gonna take me a little longer because this is something that I like love to do, but they didn't get that. And so when I had that conversation with my dad, it was super, super hard. And I remember he told me that he had no interest in knowing like what I was doing in ministry because he didn't agree with it. And so like, can y'all imagine like your own parent telling you that, right? Yes, Bill. He does, yeah. But he's changed a lot. So yeah, I'll give him credit, don't worry. So, but at the time, this was like 2 years ago, and so it was really hard, right? And so that, knowing that my dad thought that of me, it instilled a lot of fear, a lot of feeling of unworthiness in being a leader, because I was like, if my dad doesn't believe in me, then how are students going to listen to me? How are other people going to be listening to me, right? And so it's probably not difficult for you guys to remember sometimes or times in the past whenever y'all have been hurt by people's words, because that's something that I remember to this day. And now my dad supports me a lot. It's hard for him to understand sometimes, but he does, like both of my parents do, right? But I mean, it's hard to forget that, you know? And so words have a lot of power. And what we do with someone, so what do we do whenever someone hurts us that deeply, right? What do we do when we really want to use our words like weapons? So, like how I mentioned last week, we're going to be going through, like throughout the series, we're just going to be going back to scripture. And last week we went into the book of James, and we're going to go back to the book of James. It's just such a good book. And so James is known, again, like how I mentioned last week, it's known for its straightforward instructions on how to follow Jesus. Because who was James? We mentioned this last week. Who remembered? Yes. Jesus' stepbrother. Good job. Okay, so let's all turn. Who has their Bible today? Half-brother. Yes. Helen, good job. Is that it? Wow. And Terry, yeah. Okay, cool. So everyone turn their Bibles. Whoa, that got louder. Was that just me? Sorry. So everyone turn their Bibles to James chapter 3. And we're going to be going through verses 2 through 12. And so if y'all don't have y'all's Bibles, they should be up. Yeah. So they're going to be up in a second. Let me turn to it really quick. So chapter 3, verses 2 through 12. Oh my goodness. All right, everyone there? Okay. Verse 2. We all stumble in many ways. Anyone who is never at fault in what they say is perfect, able to keep their whole body in check. When we put bits into our mouths of the horses of When we put bits into our mouths of horses to make them obey us, we turn the whole animal. Or take ships as an example. Although they are so large, they are driven by strong winds. They are steered by a very small rudder, wherever the pilot wants to go. Likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. The tongue also is a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole body, sets the whole course of one's life on fire, and it is itself set on fire by hell. All kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, sea creatures are being tamed and have been tamed by mankind. But no human being can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil, full of deadly poison. With the tongue we praise our Lord and Father, and with it we curse human beings who have been made in God's likeness. Out of the same mouth come praise and cursing. My brothers and sisters, this should not be. Can both fresh water and salt water flow from the same spring? My brothers and sisters, can a fig tree bear olives or a grapevine bear figs? Neither can a salt spring produce fresh water. So, I really like how it said, or how it mentioned, I've been reading this for the sermon, but I just realized that it mentioned cursing those who are made in God's likeness, because we had mentioned that last week, right? Whenever we are trying not to play favorites, and we see these people, and we have to look at them as God's breath of life, right? In order to look at them as human beings. And so it mentions that even here. This was just a really, really good scripture, because it just uses a lot of pictures to help us understand the power of our words. So at first I didn't get it, but then putting pictures to it, right? So in verse 3, it mentions a bit, and I have a picture up here of what that looks like, because I didn't know what that was up until I looked it up. This is a bit, and something so small is used to control such a large animal. And it's with such ease, right? Who has rode a horse here? I've never ridden a horse. I've ridden a donkey. Okay, that's a lot of people. So I'm sure that y'all know that it makes it much easier for you to control the horse, for you to you know what I mean? So, and it's such a small thing. The next imagery that it shows is the rudder, which I didn't know what that was either. But I'm sorry, but this is what it is on a boat, and even on a plane. It's such a small little thing that is used to control the boat and the plane, and it's just crazy. And then lastly, the spark. So, I mean, everyone knows what a spark is. So we use small controlled sparks to light candles and campfires and fireplaces and stuff. And so all of these, all in all of these small little things make such a big difference in different situations and examples, right? So the words we say might seem small, but they have the potential to make a significant impact, right? Because I know that in that moment, my dad didn't think that he hurt me. My dad didn't think that he meant anything by what he said to me, but it made a really huge impact in my life, right? And how I viewed myself for a really, really long time. So, if y'all remember, or I don't even know if I mentioned this, but so James often retold the teachings of Jesus, because I mean he was his half-brother, not step-brother. He retold the teachings of Jesus in his own words. So let's take a look at one of the scriptures, and I love this one, because it was so in this passage, there's religious leaders, and for y'all that have read most of the Gospels, or even have seen the Chosen series, I'm sure that y'all have seen how the religious leaders, the Pharisees, are always trying to catch Jesus slip up. So they poke at him and poke his buttons and ask him all these questions and stuff, and they just try to catch him slip up all the time, but he never does, right? So in this passage, they come up to him and they're criticizing on the fact that his disciples don't fast, because that's the religious rule to do, and that's why they're not holy and all this thing. Just a lot of judgment just in that place, right? So let's all turn our Bibles to the book of Mark. Mark 7, yes. Mark chapter 7, and then verses 6 through 8, and then 20 through 23. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to read the first two verses, so 6 through 8. Where are you? He replied, Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you hypocrites. As it is written, these people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain. Their teachings are merely human rules. You have let go of the commands of God and are holding on to human traditions. And then 20 through 23. He went on, what comes out of a person is what defiles him. For it is from within, out of a person's heart, that evil thoughts come: sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, lewdness, envy, slander, arrogance, and folly. All of these evils come from inside and defile a person. So those two passages are very much alike in the sense that their theme is saying that our words, because we're standing here and praising the Lord, right? But how many of us struggle with judging people behind their backs, or even in our minds? Because I know that's me. It's so bad. And sometimes Jimena is actually the one that always catches me in that. Hey, you don't know where they're coming from, or hey, you need she's that peace of mind of mine, and I'm whatever he meant. But yeah, and so these passages are so, they make my eyes open so much, because it's so ridiculous to me how we are here in church praising the Lord on Sunday mornings, and it's like clocking into church and then clocking out, and then we're a completely different person. Or y'all coming to youth group, clocking in at 6 p.m. and then clocking out at 8 p.m. and then there y'all go again, right? So that is not what Mark and James are preaching here, guys, like at all. So in that passage where Mark was talking to the religious leaders, Jesus' words might sound harsh. And so something that I'm not like teaching y'all is like not to say anything negative, right? Because sometimes, who here can take constructive criticism well? Oh, wow. Okay, that's a good amount of y'all. It depends. Yes, people's intent. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, like they're not compassionate. And see, that's why there has to be a good balance with truth and love, right? Because you can't be too truthful and not love enough, and then the other way around. So that's not what, because Jesus loved these Pharisees, even though that they were trying to catch them in a lie. They were judging him all the time and trying to catch him in like slipping up and stuff. He loved these people, but he loved them so much that he had to call them out right then and there, because he knew that what they were doing was so wrong, especially because they were always being watched. And even in that passage, a verse before the passage that we read in James, it says, not all people should become teachers, because you have to be very careful with what you preach. And that was a huge example with how the religious leaders were teaching, because it was all legalism, right? So another thing that I got from the passage that we read in Mark is that God doesn't want our hypocritical words. And like how I mentioned, no matter how many words we use to pray and worship, he's not going to pay attention to any of that if we are behind closed doors judging people, talking bad about people, and not being compassionate, right? Because we have to show that grace and mercy that he has showed us, because he does that constantly, because we are human and we mess up, right? And then lastly, that our words reflect our hearts. So a little fun fact that I found this out like 2 years ago was that relationships normally, like people who are dating, normally break up like at a 3 or 4 month mark, because that's how long a person can really like keep a face on, or like a different personality on. And then after that 3 to 4 month mark, they start like showing their true colors and who they truly are. And then people are like, oh, this is who they are. And then that's whenever it kind of breaks off, because you're pretending to be someone that you're not, right? And so that's exactly, and not in the relationship sense, right? But we can't pretend, because imagine here, me, right, standing preaching to y'all. And imagine if I was like, if y'all were hanging out with me somewhere else and I just kept judging like the volunteers that are around here, right? What would y'all think? Like, why is she up there? Why is she an intern? Why? Yeah, call me out. Exactly. So that's not okay. So I can't be one way here at church and then a completely different way outside of the four walls of here, because ministry does not stop here. You what, Theo? Ministry does not stop. Yes, thank you. So both Jesus and James knew that this was true, that the words that we say matter, because they're a reflection of who we really are. And now I'm going to share a little story of a time whenever like someone's words did super, super good to me. And this was like so weird to me, guys, because a few weeks ago I took a retreat for my other job, and we were practicing like this thing, and it was kind of weird because I've never done this before, but we were kind of getting, because we were all staff members, and so we were getting like in little circles everywhere, like groups, I mean, and we were basically like making little exercises on how to hear God's voice, right? And so I was with a group of people that I didn't know, like at all. I had never talked to them. They were these staff members, because I'm new to this job, and so these are people that have always been here. And so I'm in this group, and it's like this guy, his name is Donovan, he's praying over me. And he starts praying, and he's like, you're very insecure in who you are. You are not secure in the leader that you are. You need to learn how to trust the Lord more in your leadership and all of this stuff. And I start sobbing, because I'm like, how does he know like my biggest weakness right now? And the word that he says is like, the Lord wants you to know that you are solid. And so at first I didn't really get it, but then he started elaborating more on it, and he was like, you're solid. Like, if someone was to ask me, like, is the sky blue? Like, no, duh, it's blue, right? So it's like, no, duh, that you belong in ministry because you're called. And so I just remember the feeling of that, and it wasn't directly him. And I guess my point to that story is that sometimes people are going to walk into y'all's lives so that the Lord can speak through them to you. And I hope that y'all have had that, like, experience already. And if you haven't, then I just pray to the Lord that you do soon, because that is one of the most amazing things, to be reassured by someone and you knowing that, like, the Lord is speaking through them. And it's like, yeah, I am a child of God. I am worthy. Like, I shouldn't be doing this, right? And so since then, I heard what he was telling me loud and clear. And I don't know who has been, there's a lot of y'all that, like, just popping into my office sometimes or bang on the window. Yeah. But on the window, I have those little markers. Whenever y'all walk in and then y'all see that it says, like, welcome and stuff, those little markers I use so that I can write affirmations on my big windows in my office. And so one of them is, like, I'm solid. Like, I will always, like, I'm not always going to be solid, right? But through the Lord, like, I'm as solid as a rock, right? Because he gives me that strength. And so that's just something that completely just changed the view about my identity. And so sometimes it's easier to remember the hurtful things that people say about us, but it's also super easy to remember whenever something really speaks to you and it changes the way that you view things. And I'm sure that y'all have experienced that too, right? So that's why it's super, super important to watch our words carefully. And we need to speak. And when we speak, we need to look at our words up close. So we wonder about our words. Whether you're speaking to a person or online, ask yourself, is this hurtful? Is this going to help them? Is this going to make their day better? Or is it going to make it worse? Because I promise you that that will work. Because you guys have to think through that. Especially this generation knows more about mental health than any other. Like, it's very true, because a lot of us have experienced that, right? I've gone through depression and anxiety, and dude, when I tell you that people's words really affected me during that time, it really affected me. I felt very just not stable in who I was, and if I had someone tell me, like, as a joke, hey, you're ugly, I'd be like, yeah, I am. But, like, it's not true, but you just take it in a different way because it's just different. So you never know what someone is going through, and it causes, just like a spark, like how we mentioned earlier, it creates such a big change. And then spend extra time thinking before you speak. So because it's so easy to be careless with our words, but that pause can really help us and help that person without them even knowing it. And then forgiving whenever people's words hurt. I can't imagine if I didn't forgive my dad for what he told me years ago. I can't imagine, because my relationship with my dad is the most stable it's ever been, and I never imagined that happening. If 2 years ago you told me, like, Sabrina, you and your dad are going to be, like, at this pace, and me and him still argue, me and him still fight, things aren't perfect, right? He's my dad, but, like, I have never felt so, like, secure in my relationship with my parents, right? And so I can't imagine if I held a grudge because of what he told me 2 years ago. So forgive each other, guys, because people are in different places the same way that you are whenever you're being hurt. The way they're hurting you is because they have hurt in their hearts. So that's the root of it. And then forgive yourself whenever you hurt other people as well. And then lastly, choose words that help. So don't choose to stay silent, and only saying nice things. Like Jesus, sometimes we need to say words that are true even if they're uncomfortable. So there's a lot of times whenever, like, Jimena calls me out and she says things that make me super uncomfortable, or Chris, or Anto, or my mentors and stuff, people around me, and I'm like, yeah, you know what, you're right, and I have to think through that. And it's annoying because I know that they're right and that I'm wrong, right? But you guys, we have to listen to that. And so it's not easy to be super careful about our words, and that's the point. Because God hasn't called us to be comfortable, right? He's called us to be faithful. Who here, after you turned, like, Christian, things didn't get better? They honestly got kind of worse. They got very uncomfortable, right? Super, super uncomfortable. And that was the first thing that I heard after I got baptized. This guy came up to me and he was like, hey, congrats. What did he say? He was like, get ready for, like, the worst. My gosh, I completely forgot what he said. But he was just basically warning me that, like, get ready because it's not going to be easy. And I was like, what are you talking about? And so I encourage y'all now in saying, like, this week, will you decide to do something so simple but difficult at the same time? Because it's so simple if you think about it, just thinking about what you're going to say, but it's also so difficult to tame the tongue, just like how Scripture told us today, right? So will you strive to love God and love others with the words that you say this week? Because remember that radical people watch the words that they say. Always, always. Okay, so I'm going to pray us out, and then we're going to go to our small group. So guys stay here, and then girls go back in there, just like last week. Jesus, I thank you, and I just praise you, and I am in such awe of what you're doing in my life, and speaking on this today has just impacted me a lot, and knowing that I'm here now, and that words are such a big thing in our lives, and just knowing that through the good and through the bad, like they make us who we are, Jesus. And so I just pray healing over anyone that has gone through that. I pray restoration in their hearts and their minds whenever it comes to being hurt by other people with their words, because I know that it can be super hard in going through a process of forgiving someone or letting go of the comments that people make about you. So I just pray that over every single one of these students. I pray that throughout this small group that we are able to open up, that you are able to just be ever present in every single conversation that we are, every single comment. And I just thank you for this message. I thank you for this day. And I praise you for every single student that has made it here tonight. In your name I pray, amen.